Sam Darnold isn't a quarterback you win with. He's one you win because of. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much, especially holiday week. So I hope if you got a lot of travel going on, I can warm up your earballs in the meantime. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, of course, we are recapping the Vikings' 27-24 nail-biting victory, hard-fought game against the Seattle Seahawks. And before we get into anything, as you can tell if you're watching, maybe even if you're listening, I'm not on my normal setup right now. I'm traveling for the holidays, of course, with family. So if I do have any weird technical glitches or anything, that's why I apologize in advance. But what a beautiful game to have in that context, where, look, for I think a lot of us, especially people like me that don't necessarily live in the same place where we grew up, and that means that we don't get to see family, every single weekend, right? It's kind of the holidays, and that's the time of year where you go see everybody. And that means that like once a year, there's a game I get to watch with everybody. And how beautiful that it was this one, that it was not only a win, but an exciting one with, exciting and fun plays against a good team. Seattle's a good team. And I don't want to hear any nonsense about how, they're just an 8-7 whatever team that they squeaked by. That's a good team. That's a tough team. And the Seahawks just made one more mistake. And that's really what this one came down to. And you can point to whichever mistake you think was the truly, the one that makes you angriest if you're a Seahawks fan. But that's really what this came down to. But really, the hero of this game, there's a lot. But the one that I think drives the Vikings to this victory the most, probably not a hot take, Sam Darnold. This was an utterly insane game. He has this thing for it's obviously kind of funny that they pointed out so much in the Monday Night Football broadcast last week, but this is the first game we've seen, or the second game we've seen of him in the rain. And then the first time in the rain was in London. It was rainy then, and nobody had the right footing. And that game kind of got really weird and wild at the second half because nobody could run around right. And Sam Darnold was pretty inaccurate. In this one, he comes out and he hangs 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, I think 12th game this year, over 112, or over 100 passer rating. And I'm pretty sure nobody in Vikings history has ever done that. He goes to 30 touchdowns on the year. That's something that the Vikings have 6 quarterbacks who have done that. That leads the league. And beyond all that, now Kevin O'Connell becomes the first head coach in Vikings history to win 13 games twice. And that's pretty crazy considering some of the legendary guys. Now, Bud Grant doesn't really count. It was 14 game seasons for most of his time. So winning 13 is kind of a different thing to him than it is in a 17 game season. But, Denny Green had his 115 in 1 year, and then was a lot of 10 and 6s and 11 and 5s. He was a very winning coach, but never had that, only had one season above 13. Same with Mike Zimmer, only one above 13. Brad Childress. They were 12 and 4 in 2009, so didn't even have any. But you get now 2 for the Vikings, and with 2 different quarterbacks. I think that speaks to culture and that speaks to something. But the way that Kevin O'Connell talks about Sam Darnold in the locker room video, which is a must watch every week, the locker room video after the game, he's like, I'm going to try not to get emotional. And you can hear just a little bit. He's like choking up talking about this game. And you want to talk about adversity. There are so many little legacy moments. I remember few weeks ago, do you remember talking about like the legacy moment of Sam Darnold in Soldier Field that I couldn't get over? this moment where he gets hurt on a throwaway, kind of low, like chase, D-line's chasing him and kind of lands on his ankle funky. And he's got to go out for a couple plays. And Nick Mullins did a couple plays. And Darnold came in and threw like two amazing passes and led this like absolutely ice cold drive while hurt to like get the Vikings, just a little bit more cushion. And it felt like it was kind of the dagger at the time, but then you had the meltdown and the onside kick nonsense. And then he has to come out and do it again in overtime. And it's like gutty. It's so gutty. And somehow he outguttied that, playing on a bad foot with a bad pinky. And then his ankle gets hurt too in this game. And he doesn't miss a beat on that. Like visibly, he's limping. So is Geno Smith. It's in the rain, like the elements, right? I mean, it's not like the elements in the same way that like a snow game is, or like muddy, and it's 20 degrees out. But like it's still, I mean, that's still something of an equalizer. You saw a lot of moments of on both teams of just either a drop or just a kind of a slip that wasn't quite it was a little wet out. So that's all working against you. And to put together an icy game, to take care of the football really well. There's one play I didn't like where I thought he kind of forced the ball and it was a little late. He got hit as he threw. It could have been a pick. And that was like kind of it. The rest of them, maybe he held the ball too long, but he wasn't like unsafe with it, which was the whole thing about Darnold coming into this season. And now in the last, 6 games, he's got like 15 touchdowns and 1 pick. And that pick came on 4th down and was better than an incompletion. So he is taking care of the ball so well. But it goes beyond that. The way the team is like rallying around him, you hear again, that locker room video, the way O'Connell talks about everybody, and he gives a game ball out to all these players. He gives one to Ryan Wright and to Will Riker, and he gives one to Dallas Turner for he gets his first interception of his career, and it's a beautiful play. And then one to Theo Jackson, who seals this one with an interception. And everybody claps and everybody's happy, and then they get to Darnold, and it's like different. Everybody is just so electrified around him, and he's got the most neutral expression ever. One of the sideline reporters, I think the Fox sideline reporter, asks him after the game, like, "Hey, you're 13 wins. What does that mean to you?" And he's like, "Nothing. I want to know next week." Like, it's just nothing. Like, he is so dialed in, and I think there is this even keel to him that I think when things are going bad, it can feel like apathy, but when things are going good, it's like grounding, and it makes nobody's getting too high on this Vikings team, and that's because of Darnold. And this Vikings team is 13-2 because of Darnold. And I want to kind of really emphasize that. And we maybe even will talk about it more over the week. Obviously, it's the holidays. I don't know if I'm going to do all 5 shows this week. We'll kind of play it by ear. But I want to talk about, the way that Darnold is perceived, especially by people who you can tell haven't watched him this year, that he's still turnover prone and he's still, come on, he's Sam Darnold. Like, he's been bad for, we know he's Sam, come on. And you only hear that from people who haven't seen it, who haven't looked at it and gone, oh, no, something's different. This quarterback is good. Like, this quarterback can be a franchise quarterback. And I don't know if he's going to be the franchise quarterback for the Vikings as it stands right now. The reporting suggests that they're still going to go with McCarthy, let him walk. And I think that honestly might have more to do with his camp than the Vikings. I mean, the open market's just going to make him tens of millions of dollars a year. He's probably going to go pursue that. It would be kind of insane for him not to. As much as the Vikings would probably love to keep him in the building with JJ, that's probably not the way that he's going to want to handle this opportunity that he has earned for himself. And I think everybody understands the dynamic there. But there's a couple of like moments and throws in this game. I mean, there's just like a dot of a rainbow throw over Justin Jefferson, who gets called for a taunting on the gritty. He got a little inappropriate with it, I think. I think either that or it was just because he kind of made eye contact and pointed directly at a player. That's kind of what taunting is. That's like the most common taunting call. But it was the second Justin Jefferson touchdown that, and that whole drive. Now the lore of it comes out after the game. Kevin O'Connell goes up on the podium and he says, so the headset goes out in the middle of the play call. Here's the formation, but that's it. And so Darnold goes to the huddle and he says after the game, yeah, I just kind of called something I thought everybody knew. So he just called his own play. Darnold just like in the moment, because he couldn't hear the play. All right, I got to call a play. Called a play, got to the line, got the play off, and then ran and took off. It was, I think, like 2nd and 4 and he converted. So, and you can see him come back right to the sideline and talk to Kevin O'Connell. But there's that moment. And remember, he's doing all this hurt, by the way. in a bunch of different places. So there's that moment, but then there's the moment, a few plays later where he spots a busted coverage. There are a couple of people in Seattle. They do something called the Seattle Overload podcast that I think is some of the best football breakdown you'll ever get anywhere. That broke down Matty Brown. He's phenomenally smart, and he broke down this error that the Seahawks made. They screw up their cover two. The guy's supposed to be over the top of it, isn't over the top of it, and Justin Jefferson adjusts the route to it. And Sam Darnold catches what's going on and throws the ball exactly where it needs to be for where Justin Jefferson did that. So it's not only that the like arm talent, the accuracy, and there were some absolute strikes in this one, like just arm talent, just raw arm talent wise. It's not just that though. It's that wherewithal to see adversity. The headset goes out. I'm hurt, right? I'm getting under pressure. The blitz is hitting me. And to make a good decision, a safe decision, but still going for those explosives is beautiful. He was the best player on the field today, right? Like maybe Justin Jefferson, but like you're arguing between like those two. And I honestly think if you're a Seahawks fan, you're probably talking about Geno Smith as the best player on the field for them, I would say. I mean, he did not take care of the ball. And I think that was the difference in this game. One QB was safe with the ball and one wasn't. And you see the Vikings won by 3, right? They had a Dallas Turner interception that turned into a field goal. And then the interception at the end that prevented the Seahawks from getting their game-tying field goal attempt. Everything was even other than those plays. So take care of the ball. And there was a dropped Blake Cashman interception. There was a dropped Shaq Griffin interception. So very unsafe with the ball versus very safe with the ball, and safe with the ball won. That's the kind of stuff that matters in these like super tight games. So here's what I want to do. I mean, we got to talk about the defense. There are some struggles on the defense. I want to talk about what I think happened there, and then just highlight some of the other like unlikely heroes that we got, because this is just the year of that. So we're going to get into all that next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players and go check out what their Prize Picks is and whether you think they'll do better or worse. That's all it is. And if you want, you can use demons and goblins, go more conservative or more aggressive, and adjust your payouts accordingly and put together a lineup. It can be all quarterbacks if you want. It can be all tight ends if you want, whatever. Whatever it is, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. In this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering you 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. I appreciate you all so very much. If you are jonesing for a little film breakdown, you can go to my Patreon page. By the time this episode is up, everything on there will be free. So you can go watch all my Dallas Turner breakdowns. I did 3 of them over the last 3 weeks. You can go watch a Jalen Redmond breakdown, all the Sam Darnold stuff I've done all year, whatever it is that you are into. But now I want to talk a little bit about the defense that the Vikings put forth today, because it was a little bit suspect sometimes. But the bend don't break nature of the defense has been a thing for a while. I think it did a little bit too much bending. And yes, there were 2 interceptions, and we'll talk about those in the next segment, but there were problems. They did not get the pressure that Geno Smith had given up, say, to the Packers last week. And, Sam Ekstrom talked about this on the postcast, and I think it was an astute point. The when you're coming off of that kind of game, like you gave up a bunch of sacks, you're under pressure all day long, right? You're going to come into the next game like really over-focused on that, right? It actually kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys are watching Hard Knocks with the AFC North, but Mike Tomlin had a similar thing. They were going into a Browns game, and the Browns had just thrown a million turnovers in that crazy Monday Night Broncos game you might have seen. And he was like, okay, so they're going to be overly protecting the football. So how can we exploit that? And I think that's the step the Steelers took in that game that defensively the Vikings did not take in this game. That they didn't realize that the Seahawks were going to come out and get the ball out quickly. That was their mission. Everything we do, they even ran a 4 verts that was like 3-step drop and throw. Like 4 verts with quick game timing. That's their game plan. That's what they were going to do. It ended up, I think, in a catch to one of the big tight ends. But the difference in the offensive structures, that there was, these 3-step drops and maybe a 5-step drop, but no hitch, ball's out, right? It was, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. And then on the other side of the ball, you've got Sam Darnold holding the ball forever, surveying, looking for explosives, the way the Vikings have always done. It just all takes so long. So you had this sort of battle of quick versus long, right? Of like quick and easy versus, long, higher risk, higher reward. And that's and it came out almost even. I think that's fascinating just from a chess game like perspective. But, what that meant was Geno Smith's getting the ball out fast. And the Vikings pass rush plan this game was less about overloading and more about forcing a struggling Seahawks O-line to communicate. And I get that for sure. That's a great way to attack an ailing O-line, is stunts and twists and send 5 guys, force them into man, threaten 5 guys, force them into man protection, and then cross everybody over and see if somebody screws up. That's basically what they're doing. The problem is stunts are slow. And, you want to talk about what's the kind of like Flores player that they look for in the draft in the offseason. You need guys that can stunt fast, that can mitigate this issue as much as possible. But still, it's never going to be quite as fast as pinning your ears back and just trying to beat a guy with a rip move. So a lot of those slow stunts, the other thing is the Seahawks used a lot of extra tight end stuff, a lot of bigger players and like a lot of 12 personnel. And what that meant was the Vikings were always in their base personnel. You got to match big on big, right? So that meant you got a lot of Bullard on the field, a lot of Tillery on the field, and a little bit less of, your nickel, your dime, your kind of extra speedy guys that you can then use as part of those stunts. So what it meant was a lot of the pass rush was, I think the Rams did a good job of this too. And that's why they couldn't get to Stafford in that game. But it meant a lot of the pass rush was like Jerry Tillery, Jonathan Bullard, Harrison Phillips, and like Blake Cashman. And because you're doing a sim pressure, both the edges drop off, so no Grenard and no Van Ginkel or something. Or maybe it's maybe Grenard, but not Van Ginkel. If you ever want to rush 4 out of base, you're losing one of your edges, right? And I think the Seahawks plan was, well, let's make their pass rush slow. They're going to do a stunt, but that stunt's being run by Jonathan Bullard, and a linebacker. And then we'll get the ball out quickly enough where, especially if they still want to rush 5 all the time, we're going to get the ball out quickly against 6-man coverages. We like our odds. That seemed like Seattle's game plan, and it's a pretty good plan. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more of that kind of stuff. What that means is you got to either get smaller and faster and risk getting run on. And that's pretty tough with, the Packers and Lions being your next two. Those are 2 very physical teams. And you're probably not exactly going to see any light weenies in the playoffs either. So I don't know. You gotta be really confident in somebody like Tillery or somebody else, like having Jihad Ward in the middle and then him not getting washed out. You got to be really confident in that. I don't know if I am. Or you got to find a way to pass rush better from those areas. You got to kind of deal with either you're dropping Jerry Tillery into coverage so both your edges can go, or you got to blitz people a little bit better. You got to find a way to get through the protections better. But like Harrison Phillips wasn't going to win a pass rush rep even against an ailing center, not without making him communicate and screw up, right? Like it's just not his game. It's not what he's here for. And so I want you to do this. Go back to go to the Seattle Seahawks YouTube page and just watch the Seattle Seahawks highlight. I'm sure they've uploaded the highlights where they've cut it out just to the good Seahawks plays. And on every single one, watch who is in the pass rush. It is bananas how often those good plays came when the pass rush was created by primarily run-stopping players. So they got the Vikings into their run personnel and then passed on it. That's what they did. So good 12 personnel teams might be able to do something similar to that, and you got to just adjust the way you attack and do a better job of game planning. But you also need somebody like Geno to get the ball out quick and push the ball downfield, and that's not everybody. Not everybody can do that. And we saw just last week with Caleb Williams, he can't do that, right? Rookie can't do that. So some of these offenses, even if they do have the answers right, will still just kind of crumble under the pressure. And that's what's happened at the end of all of these games. Somebody's crumbling under pressure. There's one other point that I want to make about tackling. This might have driven you nuts as much as it drove me nuts, but the Vikings tackle high, and it's insane to me. they are a smaller team, especially on the back end, right? Unless they've got their big bullards and Harrison Phillipses and Jalen Redmond when he's healthy, and unless they got those guys, they are a small team, right? They've got Josh Metellus at linebacker. He's a safety. He's safety size playing linebacker. Guys like Van Ginkel and Renard are not the biggest edges in the world, right? They're not these power edges. They got a lot of DBs on the field all the time. Like, they play light and fast. So many advantages come from that, right? So it's super worth being a little bit lighter so you can get a little more speed, obviously. But when you are that player, you cannot tackle high. You got to get down low. You got to get your arms wrapped around their hips. And it feels like a lot of guys are going for strips. And I get it, right? Turnovers are great. You're going for the big play. It's the aggressive mentality the whole team has. But you didn't force a single fumble in this game. And how many missed tackles did they have? How many tackles did they have where they got the tackle, but not after 6-7 more yards after contact? Or where they would push him out of bounds eventually, but they would get, 6 more yards out of contact after contact. Those are bothersome to me. That's meat on the bone. And I think there's meat on the bone on the other side too, right? There's a couple drops there's one, I don't know if I'd call it a drop from Jalen Naylor or not, but it was a failed catch, right? Somebody broke it up. There were a couple of Hawkinson that got broken up, one to Addison that got dropped. That I think there was an Aaron Jones drop. So you had meat left on the bone. And so this offense can be much better than it was on Sunday, but it was sure as heck good enough. And I would say the same to the defense, but there are, I think, a few clear ways for them to get better. But really, the game came down to these final few plays that were all so well, it was so perfectly tailored to go to the last guy you'd expect. And hasn't that been kind of the thing all season long? That'll be next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, which is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook for a reason, and that is because you can finish the season strong with, get this, $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Whatever that first $5 bet is, and by the way, you can go find some short odds alt line or something like that. But whatever that is, you can get 50 to 1 on it. So go find a minus 3,000 alt, over 19.5, and go get 50 to 1 on it. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to pick up your W, whether it's all of their same game parlay builders with all these tools that have stats and everything you need, or they have all those stats and live updates in their live betting app. So if you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can go hit that as well. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast post-game recap. Vikings go to 13-2. Before we get into the kind of unsung heroes thing I want to do, a real quick update on playoff positioning and all that. Things have simplified. We don't have to do strength of victory watching anymore because the Commanders beat the Eagles, which is a game I saw I saw the last touchdown, but I've seen nothing else of. And as soon as I'm done recording, I'm going to go watch the highlights because that's crazy. That game seemed insane. 5 turnovers, 5 Jaden Daniels touchdowns. I can't wait. But what that means is the Eagles falter now. The Vikings and Lions both at 13-2. If the Vikings and Lions, if the Vikings beat the Packers, it actually doesn't matter what happens in the Lions game. If the Vikings beat the Packers, Week 18 is for the division. Even if the Lions lose, because the Lions could still come tie it back up with us and get their tiebreakers back, right? So if the Vikings beat, because they would have head-to-head, they would have swept us. So if the Vikings beat the Packers that game's probably getting moved to a late window game. That means that Week 18 is for the division. It's all that needs to happen now. So we're so very close. So this game came down to some really good major plays from the last guy you'd expect. And that has just been all season long. Even the Sam Darnold of it, right? You pull a time traveler out of 2021 And he'd be like, yeah, Sam Darnold's 13-2 with the Vikings. And he'd be like, who is 13-2 with the Vikings? What? Like, that kind of energy has permeated everywhere. The last interception, which, by the way, another colossal screw up by the Seahawks that the Vikings pounced on and capitalized on. And this is why I say it's like the Seahawks made one more mistake. And I think the Vikings were more punishing about those mistakes, even though, the Dallas Turner interception, they couldn't cash that into a touchdown, still getting points off that, right? But just being able to say, oh, someone ran the wrong route, this is an interception now to end the game, not just 2nd and 10. Because it was the first play of the potential game-winning drive. And I think it's honestly kind of the same thing as the Justin Jefferson touchdown. So it's really poetic. The Vikings are in what looks to me like cover 6, but don't quote me. Some kind of coverage with 2 guys over the top. It could be like a cover 3 thing or like a cover 1 thing. But what happens is two defenders kind of get on top of each other. It's Theo Jackson, and I want to say it's Cam Bynum. And DK Metcalf sees this. And what I think he's supposed to be running a corner route. What I think he does is he sees this as a coverage bust, and he makes the same kind of route adjustment that Justin Jefferson made with Sam Darnold. And for the Vikings, we know that was a route adjustment. Kevin O'Connell said that that's a route adjustment. That's like a thing that you can do in the context of the play. They've never done it before, probably because, cover 2 hasn't busted on them before. That's a pretty rare thing. But it is like, hey, if they screw up, you can do this and go get a touchdown. And I think that's what DK Metcalf was trying to do. But he either saw it wrong or read something wrong. Maybe that play is like it's a post against this leverage or a corner against this leverage or something. Whatever it is, he doesn't do what Geno Smith expects, and Geno Smith launches a ball to absolute nowhere, and Theo Jackson's all over it. So kind of a gift. But I would say, as much as you want to say, oh, well, the Seahawks screwed up and, then the Vikings, you want to moral defeat this, and I'm sure hate listening Packers fans would love to do that. I don't think you can do that when the Seahawks seem to have screwed up the exact thing on their game-losing interception that the Vikings used to get their go-ahead touchdown. Like, this game came down to that skill, and the Vikings had it, and the Seahawks didn't. There you go. But for Theo Jackson, who is only in because Harrison Smith has a foot injury, Kevin O'Connell said he kind of had to force the issue and get Harrison Smith to sit down. Otherwise, he would have played through it. He would have insisted on playing through it, and he kind of had to pull rank and say, no, you're out today. And that they aren't worried. They're pretty optimistic to have him back next week. He also used fairly optimistic language about having Pace back next week, so we'll see how all that goes. Kevin O'Connell does tend to be a little too rosy sometimes, so grain of salt. But that meant that Bobby McCain was in, and that Theo Jackson was in, and they were kind of switching off. They were rotating snaps a little bit. Theo Jackson ends up with this pick. But how about Dallas Turner with the other pick? Not necessarily that unexpected of a hero, right? Like, he's a first-round pick. But for one, he's a D lineman, right? He's a pass rusher. So him getting an interception is pretty crazy. But the way he played that, and if you listen to my Dallas Turner episode of this show a week or 2 ago, and if you've watched all my Dallas Turner Patreons on patreon.com/NFL, you will know that Dallas Turner has gotten really good at placing himself exactly where he's supposed to be on those hook drops, on those zone drops off the line of scrimmage. That's not a given skill. That's not a brain dead thing. You're not dropping to just the hash mark. You need to relate to routes. You need to make really quick reads and quick decisions about how much depth and width you get. And wrong, you give up a completion, and a lot of completions are on that from the Van Ginkels and the Dallas Turners and the Jonathan Grenards and the Patrick Joneses, and you do expect some of that when you're dropping your pass rushers into coverage. It's just kind of part of the cost of doing business with all the sim pressure stuff that Brian Flores does. But what if you had a guy that was really good at it? And that's kind of what Van Ginkel is. That's what Dallas Turner is meant to be. That's why he's a fit for these kinds of things. If you can cover, wow, right? That was beautiful. And that the play goes for a while, in large part thanks to a Jihad Ward pressure, which, by the way, Jihad Ward had pressure on the other interception. That pressure is probably going to get credited to Josh Metellus. The first one, the Dallas Turner one, will probably get credited to Josh Metellus, who was coming screaming off the edge, chasing Geno down. Geno has to extend the play, and then he flips up a really dumb one that Dallas Turner jumps like a cornerback. It's a beautiful interception. But Jihad Ward, he gets held on that play, which is very funny because I'm seeing a lot of Seahawks fan complain about the holding on the second Justin Jefferson touchdown I've been gushing about. While I'm here, a quick note on that. So I think it's Boye Mafe, whoever gets held there, he rips underneath Cam Robinson's arm. When you do that rip move, that bicep to ear, that you are now allowed to hold. The lineman is now allowed to hold. That's part of the holding rule. You can look it up. So a lot of Seahawks fans are really mad about that. They're wrong. And I can point to you worse holding rep on Jihad Ward on the Geno Smith interception. So sit down. But he pushes that pocket there that gets rid of the escape lane for Geno Smith to take. So now he has to roll his way out, cut the field in half, and force a throw that's an idiot throw. That there are all kinds of plays over this one. It didn't end up materializing into anything, but there's a beautiful Levi Drake Rodriguez run stop on the goal line. Unfortunately, they scored it, 2 plays later through the air, but that's a beautiful play. You had a beautiful catch and run for CJ Ham for a first down. It really takes a village in this world. And, especially in a world where we cover the snap count so much, maybe it's just because it's the first information that comes out after the game. But with Brian Flores' defense in particular, everybody eats. And even if you're Theo Jackson or you're Jihad Ward or you're Levi Drake Rodriguez and you're at the bottom of these depth charts and you're there, you might be in a crucial moment over the guy they paid, $20 million to. Like, that might just happen. And that's part of it. And for those guys to step up and make those plays, that's really beautiful. It is so hard to look at what has happened this year and not start to daydream about how far this thing can go. And I think that's perfectly fine of you to do, right? Live in it while you got it. Because, no matter what happens, we're only in this moment for a little bit. And I hope you got to enjoy it with those you love. And even if you didn't, I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless, because this was a really fun game. And I give all the credit in the world to Seattle and especially their secondary, their offensive line for sorting all that out. But a lot of it goes to Geno Smith. I think it feels to me like they eliminated a playoff team, which they didn't even fully, by the way. So now the possibilities are, if the Vikings win out, they're the 1 seed. If they don't, they're probably the 5 seed. They could actually lose both of their upcoming games, and the Packers could overtake them by winning out and become the 5 seed, but I think that's the only way they lose it. So whether they're the 5 or the 6, they would travel. And I think the possible teams remaining, as it stands right now, they would travel to Atlanta and play the Falcons with Michael Penix now instead of Cousins. They could end up traveling to LA, depending on how things shake out at the end. They could technically still travel to Seattle. Seattle wins out and overtakes the Rams. Or they could travel to Tampa. Those are, I think, the 4 outcomes if they end up traveling on the road. Those are your people. So whichever team of those you want to see, I don't really believe in making that declaration. They're all good teams, and winning in the playoffs is going to be hard no matter where you go. But whichever one of those you want to see, root for them to go get the 3 or the 4 seed, probably the 4 seed, unless the Packers. Well, actually, yeah, if the Packers win Week 18, they would play the Bears, and the Vikings would play the Lions in a meaningless one. So you could see the Packers totally doing that, right? But it really comes down to Week 18, right? They could go all the way from the 6th to the 1st if they win that. So, the stakes are high, but we keep on rolling, and now we really test their mettle. Really test them. The last few games have been a lot of okay teams. The Falcons, Cardinals, Seahawks, good teams, but not true great teams. Well, now the Packers and the Lions are both right there with the Vikings in terms of their Super Bowl odds, their season futures from here on out, and what everybody expects from them. So this NFC North gets decided here and now. Let's see what happens. We got Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. I'll see if I can get a mailbag for you. I'll put a mailbag out, and if I don't get to it, then I'll just save the questions for later. I will talk to you all then. Love you. Have a lovely holiday, and as always, Skol.